thank you for all your hard work at the end of the table there. The next item is item 27, Hearings Panel Report on the Proposed Traffic and Parking Bylaw 2017. Are they here?
Yes.
Right, this was the one. David, would you... Oh, no, not David. Andrew, would you introduce this one?
Thank you. And this is the one of these bylaws where the hearings panel was not of one mind, so it wasn't a unanimous recommendation. I imagine that's why Councillor Livingstone has indicated that this is an issue for him. So the hearings panel was generally in support of the proposed bylaw. Most of the recommended changes that you see are to provide clarification or explanation rather than being substantive in nature. And the main focus of the hearings panel was on two things, I guess, really. Focus on the issue of parking on berms was one part of that. And there really we spent some time in discussion balancing the appropriateness of this particular method of parking and damage to berms with inconvenience to residents, particularly in areas where other options for parking were limited. So the recommendation of the hearings panel on this actually upholds the proposal, which is not to allow parking on berms, but as I say, that part of our recommendation was not unanimous. We also considered matters relating to what was termed storage of vehicles on roads, so parking of trailers, boats, camper vans, caravans and so on, for periods exceeding 7 days. And there were some submissions that we dealt with on this, particularly relating to and discussion around where there were problems caused by such parking, but also where, because of the nature of development and the nature of the roads, off-street parking often wasn't available, and that was the only option for residents to park such trailers and vehicles close to their properties. And again, on balance, after some discussion and considering the matters raised in the submissions, we decided to recommend, as per the proposal, which was not to allow those vehicles to be parked on roads for longer than 7 days. So I understand that there's some further information come in from Orion, which is supplementary to the submission that we heard from Orion and the advice that we received as a panel. I might hand over to staff to provide any further information from Orion, which has been supplied by way of clarification since the hearings.
So Orion have provided some more information. They were not particularly happy with our suggested note that we put in the bylaw to address their concerns, but staff do have a remaining concern about granting blanket exemptions to companies, even if it is for the parking provisions, because we still have underlying concerns about safety hazards.
So the advice to council is the same as the advice that you provided to the panel?
Yes, that's right. That's our preferred position.
Yep. So having heard that, I think it's fair to say that I can be confident in recommending our original recommendations to council, but noting that the parking on berms aspect wasn't a unanimous recommendation, everything else was. So, yeah, okay. So your issue is the berms. So if somebody moves it, are you moving it? Yep. And seconded by David, you're going to move that that clause, oh, where is it? BAMS. What's the BAM clause? I can't see it in the schedule. Where?
11.
Oh, I see. It's not. Yeah. Okay. Hang on, just 1 minute. Where is it? Sorry, which is it? One of the bullet points or?
It's not easily picked out.
No.
And at the time it was a note, which is found in 8.6, page 680.
Sorry, I just. No, it's in the actual bylaw itself. So what page is the berm change?
Page 687 is just a note. It's my different view under 8.6.
No. I'm looking for the bit that we are going to say no to if we agree with you. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to find an easy way of.
Madam Chair, the clause that is the subject of concern would be clause 11 of the bylaw, which is no parking on certain parts of the road.
Page 696.
Okay, so what parts of it have changed?
We haven't changed any, we haven't recommended to the hearings panel any changes to that clause.
So that is the current law.
Oh, sorry, I see what you're saying. No, that is not the current law. The current provision in our traffic and parking bylaw at present is that there's no parking on grass berms or grass verges where there is signs prohibiting that parking.
Right.
So what we're moving to is a different provision because the law was changed in the road user rule, and there has also been case law that now supports the position that parking on berms and verges, if that's the case, can be prohibited without the use of signage.
Yes, I know, but not everyone around the table agrees with that position. So
Right.
I want to make sure that there is a worded amendment that is capable of being debated. So, so am I able to say that that there's an amendment moved by Glenn Livingston that the sorry?
He said he's seconded, but we don't know what it is yet.
Right. There's an amendment moved by Glenn Livingston that the previous provisions relating to parking on or relating to no parking on certain parts of the road, because presumably that's what that section was called before.
No, the clause before was called parking on grass, berms and verges, something like that.
Okay, so why don't we just simply say that to not accept the amendment is to remove clause 11 and reinstate the previous clause. Is that effectively giving effect to what Councillor Livingston raised?
It just means that you have to signpost it.
We adopted the old provision. That just means we'd keep the status quo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, all right. Now, Anne, you had an issue that you wanted to raise.
No, I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to commend you on the clause 19 in terms of controlling the type of vehicles that can go on residential roads. And I guess my question is, I do have a question. Lodestar in Wigram, we have a retirement village along one side and it's going to have a hospital on the other side. At the moment it's being used as a throughway for heavy vehicles from construction sites, and it is causing issues around health and safety, which is one of the reasons we have a bylaw. So in that situation, this new bylaw would be applicable to that situation?
It is an enabling clause, and each situation in case would have to be assessed on its own merits. There is an operational policy which will need to be developed to support it should it be passed. but it would have to take into account that even in local roads, there is an acceptable level of heavy vehicles that do need to access local roads for deliveries and as part of normal traffic. Around 4% would be the upper limit. So for each case, it would need to be assessed against that. We would look to work with NZTA for some further guidance on those as well, and it would be, as I understand, a decision of council.
Great. Thank you.
Aaron, Tim, Vicky.
Yeah, I was
Andrew.
in the same position with the parking on the berms, that I didn't support that, and I wondered if this was a chance for us to, I know we're talking about expanding delegated authority to community boards, that on an issue-by-issue basis, community boards had the power to protect a particular street or next to a particular reserve. Is that a way forward?
I'm not going to do that in terms of the context of this bylaw, but
So
certainly we can raise that in the delegations discussion.
Okay, cool. I'll leave it till then.
Tim?
Thank you. With the berm being our property, and you've got a company, or whether it's Orion or anyone else, parking up and taking space to do work in that area, aren't they under an obligation to provide health and safety, so to identify the vehicle, put cones, etc. out? And if they're not doing that, shouldn't we be enforcing that? It's the same as any work program on any street in the city.
Are you talking about the berms?
Yeah, it is council property.
Yep.
And it is technically the roadway, because the roadway is a legal road, isn't it, from property to property?
Yes.
So therefore they are undertaking work on a road space, and as they are a company taking work, should they not then, under their health and safety, irrelevant of what the company is, be required to take steps to ensure safety, extra safety in that area? It's
Absolutely.
not like a private homeowner or a private person. They're companies, irrelevant of what they are. So would that not mitigate some of the concerns over company vehicles undertaking works on these places, and therefore should we not be enforcing that?
Yes, absolutely. Under the car's corridor access request process, the companies are required to have a traffic management plan, and they are required to reinstate the legal road to the condition that they found it in.
So when we started talking about berms, and Orion's concern was us banning them doing that because of one of the issues being health and safety, was the safety, because there seems to be a hell of a lot of organisations and companies, you know, just park up and there's no cone to be seen or nothing to be seen. Enable would be a perfect example of that at the moment. So, I mean, what steps can we take to mitigate, to ease the concern around the table with regards to health and safety of the berms?
The concerns around the health and safety with regards to Orion's submission was really around the access to some of the substations and other plant that they require to access in the legal road.
But that's their concern.
Yep.
Our concern is safety when they park up, isn't it?
Yes.
So they're two different things.
Yes. With regards to the safety, the traffic management plan manages the traffic, including pedestrians and all that, around the site. So that is part of their safety plan, and that's well catered for. The concern around the berms is really around the damage and the extra disruption to fixing the berms.
Department deals with the health and safety of big vehicles on berms if they need to be there by the sound of it?
Yes, CTOP.
Yeah. Vicky and then Andrew.
Mine's a question that doesn't relate to berms. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Right. Just in relation to part 27, the speed limit, does that mean, and I apologise for my ignorance on it, does that mean that if a area of town, for example, decides that they would like to be a 30k an hour area, that they can do so now under this bylaw, that we can help facilitate that?
There's no change to, this would mean there would be no change to the current situation. So this is, as I understand it, an enabling clause.
So that can happen?
Yes, should the situation meet the appropriate criteria and NZTA approval and be resolved by council.
Right. So NZTA criteria are almost impossible to reduce speed limits in areas that are rapidly changing. But if it's our road, and two things. One, we want to lower the speed limit to say 50. Can we do that easily through this, or is that a different process that still requires the blessing from NZTA?
NZTA have provided, I guess, more recent guidance and process with their setting of speed limits rule. It's 2017, so there is certainly the ability to have some flexibility around what speed limits are set. NZTA still provide that overall guidance as to what is considered appropriate in what situations.
Okay, I'm just aware hugely of the issue, sorry to go on, but there's huge issues in the southwest where areas have become previously rural and they've been 70 or 80, but they're now residential and need to be 50, and the process through NZTA is revolting. Well, it's not helpful. So is it now easier for us to determine that that's a residential area, kids are diving out onto the road, bikes, dogs, everything there, and it shouldn't be a 70k area? Or should we be looking at doing something in this bylaw that makes it easier for that one, and then I want to talk about the 30k?
So the bylaw provision in itself doesn't change anything about our actual decision-making process, because the decision-making process to do with speed limits is tied up with the speed limits rule. So they've just redone the speed limits rule. I mean, I'm not dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, so I can't answer about the actual mechanics. So this doesn't impact on it, and there's nothing that we could do in here that would make it easier for us to get those down to 50? Not through the bylaw, no.
Okay. Second question then, if an area decides that it would be safer for this area, which might have a high concentration of young kids or whatever, to be a 30k an hour area, and all the residents say yes, can we make that happen under this section 27?
This clause does enable those decisions to be made, but they would be subject to staff recommendation, which would take into account the advice from NZTA in the situation.
But we could ignore the NZTA advice if we chose to?
Well, no, we do need to follow what the speed limits rule says. Now, the speed limit rule says how we make these decisions and what advice we take into account. So I don't think we're giving you the answer that you want.
Yeah, but so the bylaw is not the right.
The bylaw is not the right tool to do that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Clause 8.5 in the report has got some figures around the cost to council of repairing damage to existing berms. But another consideration, I think, is the purpose of the berm. So when a roadway is designed or when it's repaired and redesigned, what sort of considerations are there around whether you would or wouldn't include berms, and what are the purpose of the berms, particularly focusing on any safety elements?
Okay, a primary purpose of the berms are amenity value. If all the berms are damaged, then, and frequently damaged, there would be other designs considered for that particular piece of legal road, and so therefore, like, you know, we may not be able to call ourselves the Garden City if we do not have the berms in place. I think the other consideration of amenity, other than amenity, safety as well, as a refuge, and visibility for the drivers and stuff.
Okay, so Dion, Yanni, Vicky. I mean, it is 3:55 p.m. and I'm going at 6 o'clock, and you are staying here until the agenda is finished.
Well, I'm going.
So
I'm going.
Just telling you.
So, I'm going at 6 o'clock to open a building
Yanni,
for you too.
Vicky, and Anne.
Did you cover the defences before?
Now. Good. Dion?
Actually, no. I'll just leave.
Yanni?
Just wanted to check over the the whole issue of contractors and the damage, because I'm still not convinced that we've got the right processes in place. We've heard that we've got another process underway around things like charging bonds. But in terms of the bylaw, is there anything that we can do to strengthen the requirement to do the assessment of the road before the contractor works there, whether it's construction or utilities, and then afterwards, so that we've got a good record? Because often...
If this is not relevant to the bylaw, please just say so, because I'm not going to waste time on questions that are not relevant to what we're here to discuss.
It's just so clause part 3, interference with road traffic or pedestrians. Recent experience with Central City rebuild shows there needs to be stricter regulation to protect footpaths and road surfaces from damage during constructions.
So which section of the bylaw does this specifically refer to?
It's
page
part
3.
Part 3.
Part 3.
So part 3 really codifies our process and requires that if people are going to interfere with the normal operating conditions of a road, they need to get a permit. So we need to know what people are doing. And then that's where James's team kicks in and has the corridor access request, the temporary management plans, etc. That's backed up by, ultimately, if people don't comply with that, they'll be breaching the bylaw and they can be prosecuted. We also have backup in section 357 of the Local Government Act, which creates an offence for doing damage to the road.
And we've also added clause 28, the permissions clause. We have strengthened that as well to make it a bit more understandable for people that do need to go through a permission process to make sure they've covered off all the conditions that they need to.
Right. So are you confident that this will see an improved level of oversight and monitoring and a reduction on the expense to council, or, an improved outcome for the city?
So we follow up the people that we know about, and it is the damage to curbs from vehicles that are parking illegally and not applying for corridor access or asking for permission from the council that we are not able to follow up, and which is costing significant cost to repair.
And I just wanted to chat in terms of the parking on the berms versus the verges. So you're still saying that we shouldn't restrict parking on verges, it's only berms. And so it's quite hard, I think, for the community to understand the difference sometimes. And if people are doing damage to a verge, have you got any powers under this bylaw to actually take action? So regardless of whether they can park there or not, if they're causing damage, is there any power to take action? I just know I've had a lot of complaints along the river, for example.
Can I just raise a point of order here? We established a hearings committee to rule on, make decisions on these things. It comes back here, we either accept the hearings
which is why I asked. Which is why I asked for an indication from councillors before, because I felt exactly that we would just accept the panels. This is not the.
We're basically just going over the same sort of ground that we spend hours on.
I know.
What, you didn't do that on QE2? It's exactly what you did on QE2. You didn't do that for QE2?
That wasn't the option that was put to me. I mean, we had... I mean, the question was whether this, had to be passed now, or whether we could... take the time to send it back to the hearings panel. I mean, it's to do...
The hearings panel were very comfortable with what's proposed.
I know.
With the exception of the two issues that I raised in the introduction, The only one of those that was contentious was this one about parking on berms.
Yeah.
And it was one member of the hearings panel who didn't share the view of the other two members at that point. So, I mean, to me, that's the only issue.
Which is why I carved it out
with.
and we've worded an amendment that it makes it capable of being resolved. But it's not these. I mean, you know, I mean the.
Shouldn't be debating enforcement. That's the point, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it's capable of being debated, we can debate it. Procedurally, it looks like we can.
Yes, I know, but I'm just looking for some sort of kind of closure to the questions, but I can't stop a councillor asking questions if they are in order. I can only stop questions that are not in order.
Being passed with the exception of one particular aspect that was referred back to the committee.
Yeah, no, but this is not the question. We're not. Yanni's focusing on a different aspect of the bylaw, which actually doesn't sound as if the question's any different from what the previous bylaw was. But I don't, you know, I don't have the insight into the previous bylaw. So, has there been any change made to the definition of a verge and a berm and the implications of them other than the signage?
So a verge is where there's no curb and channel.
Yeah.
Okay. So under the previous bylaw, the council would have to pass a resolution to prohibit the parking on the berm or the verge, and then we would have to put the sign up. Under the new provision, council does not need to pass such a resolution to prohibit parking on a berm, so with the curb, and we don't have to sign it. So it's a lot more easier. And it also covers those little build-out areas where there's, you know, paving and things that are not designed to be parked on. So,
but Yanni's question was about the verges, wasn't it?
Okay, so Andrew can.
We did have some considerable discussion around the verge versus berm scenario. The main problem with the definition of verge is it takes in a wide range of situations, from a grassed road shoulder, a grassed area that runs into a swale, beachfront area out in the peninsula, foreshore land, in rural road shoulder situations, many of which are not a problem at all to park on.
Right,
it's
but
very...
you preferred to leave it as per the existing regulation.
Yeah.
So that's crystal clear. Vicky, you had another question.
No, don't worry.
Right, so you've got the amendment in your name, Glenn. Do I have a seconder for that, Dion? All right, so I'll put the amendment first. So we'll open it up for debate, and people have to debate it. So Andrew, Glenn, Sarah.
I'm going to be extremely brief. The reason, as we just heard from staff, that we create a berm is for amenity, it's for safety, it's to be grassed, and it's not a car park. If we intended creating a car park, we would create a car park. We've got the figures in 8.5 of the damage to berms, and that doesn't include, as I understand it, the damage to curbs and footpaths. A berm is a berm for amenity and safety, and to create corridors for visibility. If we wanted a car park, then that's what we would create.
Glenn, Sarah.
I'll be quick.
Yanni.
I'm just coming at this along planning and pragmatic lines. So we have provisions with our planning for greater density of housing, and I think there's a sense in which our work programs are working against each other. So we have subdivisions now in which there, you know, is with more dense housing, there are more vehicles. Now we're asking people potentially through this. We're restricting the spaces in which they can park, and I think that will give rise to some safety issues. In many cases, the berm is also the lawn. You might want to check out 17 Baltimore Green, where we rented for a year in Fairway Park. There's actually no berm. So I think we've got a few issues in some of our new subdivisions there. Someone wants to park on their lawn. What's the lawn? What's the berm? there isn't either. How do we police smaller streets? So we can all see in our new subdivisions, the houses or the planning kind of complies, but to the eye, the size of the house looks out of proportion to the size of the section. It's quite big in relation to the section. The roading, the vehicles go with that. Just on a few more points, a lot of damage is actually caused by people driving over. So even if we put this provision in place, you still have your heavy gas truck vehicles driving on your booms. They're going to tear that up. You don't have to be parked there to damage the boom. In terms of safety, we have yellow lines, which community boards have the delegation to put in place in relation to line of sight issues. So this point came up in the bylaw that we actually need to prohibit parking on booms due to line of sight. I think for most of us it's actually vehicles parked on roads which cause the line of sight issues, which is why we have those delegations for the board. It's also a principle there. The council on the one hand is saying potentially here, don't park on the booms or you can't, but it's also not mowing the booms in many circumstances. Now to me it seems that a sense of stewardship goes with ownership. So if we're really saying these are our booms, thou shalt not park on them, we're actually not tending them either. You can too think of many residents who would like more green bins to take up the clippings from the booms that they're mowing on the council's behalf. They don't have to do that. So I think the whole thing is quite problematic. It's got a pragmatic issue. How will council staff know about this? Does it serve to foster dobbing in your neighbour? And I'm not into that either. There's a lot we're doing at the moment. This is council coming out and saying no. Do we really want to do that? So I leave that with you.
Thank you. Who else? Who did I have? Sarah, Dion, Yanni.
I was going to keep this brief and just say that Andrew had covered everything, but I want to address a couple of points that Councillor Livingstone's made. One of them is about the planning and pragmatism that he was talking about. What we want to do is encourage developers who are building in higher density areas and making properties more dense to actually provide the parking on site, and this will do that. If we're saying to everyone you cannot park on the boom, then the planning needs to cater for better design for the sites that they are doing. It might also encourage people out of their cars. They're looking at more dense areas. If there's no boom parking, if they have to park on the street, or if there's none provided on site, then they're going to be looking to public transport and bikes and those other things that we want in the denser areas. And I've always been taught that two wrongs don't make a right. Just because some people don't tend their booms, just because gas trucks might drive over them and damage them, doesn't mean that we should let more people damage them. Council pays enough for remediation already. We need to put this to rest, say to everyone that you can't do it, and just let that be.
Okay. Dion, Yanni.
Yeah. The reason I won't support the putting the boom, the booms, is especially the central city, the district plan. I actually think the policy as it's written is actually ill-formed, and it could be done better. I know that there are issues around people parking on booms and on the side of the street and the damage and stuff like that, but the policy as it's written, I think, is ill-formed to actually address some of the issues, especially in the central city and in some of the suburbs. And I think it's going to capture a lot of people who are in situations that are unintended, that are actually going to sort of, make them potentially in trouble, which is not a good thing. But in the central city especially, the district plan review, the district plan has actually changed it has made it possible for developers to develop and actually not really have any on-street car parking, and that's what's happened. That's what the council or whoever did the district plan has actually said, we want that to be the way, and that's what's going to happen. Intensify housing and all that sort of stuff, so that's what they're doing, and you've got a lot more people sort of living in more denser areas. But anyway, I think it's just an ill-formed policy, and I think there's unintended consequences. And I also don't like the defence as part of the of this bylaw, because I think that could have unintended consequences for actually making people, causing trouble for people that it's actually unintended.
Yanni?
Yeah, just to say very quickly that parking on berms has been a long-standing issue. You recall that we were actually giving people tickets previously and then had to go back and actually apologise so, this has been a long-standing issue. There has been huge damage to our parks in particularly around Hagley Park in the past. So I welcome this. My concern is that we're not being strict enough on the verges. And I just invite councillors to reflect on the brief movie screenings that we saw this morning and think about the damage going into our waterways from the brake pads of cars. And if you drive along the Heathcote River, just have a look at the number of verges that have been decimated by people parking their cars with their brake pads right close to the riverbank, and look at what that's doing to our environment. So, I think we should be mindful of the fact that there is an environmental negative to the way in which people treat our city in terms of parking in some spaces which are not berms but are verges. So we do need to think about that. I've had a number of complaints from residents. It's not just yellow lines, it's actually if you park up on the berm or the verge and there's yellow lines, you're probably not going to be found to be parking illegally, and there's almost nothing council can do to take action. And so I've seen places that we spent a lot of money trying to improve the amenity just turn to mud because of the parking practices. So, I think council has been fairly pragmatic in the way in which it's enforced parking post-earthquake. I don't see this as being something to be worried that council's going to go out there and, just use this as a revenue gathering exercise. But I do think that it is, I'd like it to go further, but I appreciate that there's a debate about whether we've even gone, whether we're going too far. So I'll support what's been proposed. And I think the key thing is to monitor it and see what happens. But, I would just invite councillors to think about the environmental damage that's been done with the way in which people are parking in the city around some of our spots that we want to tidy up and improve.
Thank you. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Hands up for aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hands up for no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, it's lost. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That's carried. Do you want your vote against recorded? Yes. So that's Kewen and Swiggs and Cotter. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.